Hallo und herzlich willkommen zur nächsten Ausgabe von dem Bierlabers Online-Tasting. Das Motto ist Drink at Home. Aus diesem Grund auch heute wieder. Wir sitzen alle zu Hause und haben wunderbare Biere für uns. Vorweg einmal ganz kurz für all diejenigen, die zum ersten Mal dabei sind, ganz kurz zur Erklärung, was ihr in euren Paketen vorgefunden habt. Es ist dieser Verkostnotizzettel, wo ihr ganz einfach seht, welche Biere in euren Paketen sein sollten und hoffentlich sind genau diese Biere in euren Paketen. Und dann habt ihr einen Verkostungsbogen, den ihr nützen könnt, wo ihr euch Notizen machen könnt, persönliche Notizen zu den Bieren, welches euch sehr gut schmeckt, welches euch vielleicht weniger gut schmeckt, kann natürlich genauso passieren. Aber wie gesagt, das ist keine Aufgabe, die ihr machen müsst, sondern es ist eine Hilfestellung von uns. Heute Abend ist etwas ganz Spezielles. Wir haben einen Partner. Der Partner ist Visit Flandern. Für alle, die noch nicht in Flandern waren, ich würde es empfehlen, dass ihr dort unbedingt mal eine Reise hinmacht. Ihr findet Visit Flandern auf ihrer eigenen Facebook-Seite, aber genauso im Internet. Und Visit Flandern, da ist das Logo ganz kurz, war so nett und hat uns zum ersten Mal auch Journalisten mit eingeladen, und auch die Journalistinnen und Journalisten will ich auf diesem Weg recht herzlich begrüßen, und ich freue mich, dass ihr dabei seid, und ich hoffe, es macht Spaß. Und das Wichtigste ist bei dieser Verkostung, dass ihr Spaß daran habt und dass ihr Fragen stellt. Wir werden versuchen, also Karel und ich werden versuchen, dass wir so gut wie möglich auf all eure Fragen eingehen und diese auch beantworten. Karel ist ein absoluter Profi, wenn es geht um seine Biere, deshalb ist er auch heute mein Gast, und ich würde sagen, wir starten, und ich wechsle jetzt auf Englisch. So, good evening, Karel.
Hello, good evening, Markus.
So, first of all, I want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for immediately agreeing and saying, okay, yes, I want to do this with Austria. It's not our biggest market, but it's a good opportunity because we all have to sit at home and we have time, plenty of time. So why not? So we're gonna do this tasting. As I told in German already, you know, we have quite a good audience tonight. You know, there will be a lot of journalists as well because Visit Flandern, they are the hosts for the night, and they invited also some journalists. So maybe there will be some really good questions. I hope so. And I would say, let's start and speak a little bit about the current situation in Belgium when it comes to the life. How is life at the moment in Belgium?
Well, of course, it's very different, as you can imagine. Basically, everyone. So it's a bit at the moment. It's a bit a different point because the government is allowing us to start meeting other people again. So there's some measures being lifted. But until now, let's say everyone had to stay home as much as possible, only go outside to supermarkets, and if you had to, industries were non-essential industries were asked to close if you couldn't work from home. So also for the economy, we hear at the end of the year they're expecting a shrink of 9% of the economy, which has not happened since I don't know too long. If the financial crisis of 2008, it was an economical shrink of I think 3.5%. So to put it in perspective, the effect on the economy is big. But of course, health is more important. So the measures were needed. The bad numbers, let's say, are going down. So now we're allowed to start seeing 4 people as from Sunday per family. It's not entirely, well, it's clear, but it's a bit of a twisted system. You have to meet 4 people, but only those 4 people you are allowed to see. And those 4 people can only see you and the other 3 people. So it's a bit of it's to keep all the contact as much as to a minimum. So the government is trying to communicate with systems that are a bit complicated, but in essence, they ask, you know, use your common sense and keep a distance. Don't do risky things. Only go outside still if it's really needed. I mean, shops are going to open now for clothing and these kind of things. I think on Monday. So that means that that some normal life will return, but of course only one person is allowed into the store per 10 square meters. So can imagine not all stores are so big. So it's still it's gonna be a change still also in the public life. Public transport, you need to wear your face masks. You have to, and that's it. Bars, important for us as a brewery and for us all, I think. The restaurants are still not open. The soonest date they've mentioned is June 8th for restaurants, with a very, very big maybe. Maybe. If everything keeps going well now, maybe the 8th of June restaurants will open and bars a little bit later. But if you look at the numbers, it's for businesses, it's going to be a disaster, unfortunately. So we'll see. But other than this, people are at home trying to survive at home. For me, it works quite well with my girlfriend. We have no, we don't fight, so.
Okay, that's good to hear. That you're still in a good relationship with her.
Yes, we can enjoy good food and good drinks at home, so that's important. There's no kids yet in our for us, so that's I see with my siblings that kids can make it a bit more difficult, perhaps, but yeah.
But maybe there will be a kid soon. You have plenty of time now at home. So we will see what will happen. No, but Kyle, it's kind of similar. We are a little bit upfront, with all the regulations, because the good thing is that shops in Austria already opened since last weekend, that all shops are open again, but of course there are some regulations, one person per 10 square meter and all that kind of things. Public transport is going back to normal from next week on, but of course with masks and all that kind of things. And what is the biggest difference for us in Austria is that the bars and restaurants are gonna be open again from May 15. So that's a big difference. Yeah. But of course, also there, you're not allowed to go to a bar and drink at the bar. You must have a reservation up front. So quite challenging times, and we will see, how people react on all these regulations. And the point is, are they trusting in each other and going back to bars? They are sitting together, they cannot sit together because one of the rules is on a table for adults, 2 children, that's the maximum. But of course, you will have contact with other people, and you're sitting in a restaurant. Other good thing is you don't have to wear a mask as a guest, but the entire staff, the bar staff, must wear a mask.
Yeah, I would think it's probably good that you don't have to wear a mask if you're drinking or eating. I mean, if the waiter has to wear it, it makes sense. But I think with all the, you have to move your mask, drink or eat, and then put it back. But you're touching your mask so often, it's also not good. Not so it's yeah.
So okay.
But you have to reserve a table to go to a bar too.
Yes, you must have a reservation. You must have a reservation. Okay, now we have talked a little bit about the current situation in Austria and in Belgium. I know that most of the people which are listening and watching know the current situation of Austria, but I also want to explain you a little bit what's going on in Austria. Now, let's start the games. Let's talk about Boon. Let's talk about your brewery. Let's talk a little bit about the history. How big is the brewery? How many people are working there? Is it brewing or is it blending? Is it right when I talk about the brewery, or is it just a blending factory? So explain us a little bit. What is your position? Okay. There's your father still involved. There's your brother involved. So explain us a little bit about you and the brewery or blendery.
Okay. Okay. So we're a family brewery. First of all, my father started the brewery back in 1975. Back in the time that Lambic beer was definitely not as popular or trendy as today. Back then it was something apparently for old people, or something that was drunk like very locally here, but it was something quite specific. And in that time, lager beer was actually more the beer that took over, or or dominated most of the consumption of beer. So in that time, he started with Lambic beer, and the reason why he started had to do with the fact that he discovered this beer together with friends. Yeah, I think you have to put it, if I understand it from him, you have to put it in a sort of maybe a hippie context, like early 70s still. You have to put it in that context too. And it's an authentic product. It's something the producers, certainly back then, but also still today. But back then it were like, mostly like one-man businesses or one man with one helper running a blendery or brewery. Well, there were still some bigger breweries, of course, too. But it's a very authentic thing, a very authentic beer. And actually, it was disappearing. And my father, I suppose he somewhat fell in love with the beer because he couldn't let go. But he decided to take over a small blender in the town of Lambic. The town of Lambic, where we are situated still today. Not in the same buildings. The buildings that my father took over from that blender, we still own it, and we use it for storing old bottles. So we have some very nice stock of old bottles there, aging. One day I'll send you a price list with some vintages. But
okay, thanks. I'm looking forward to this.
But the brewery now is in the center village of the center of the village of Lambic. And so within that context, my father started the brewery. Today it's very different. The beer it's much more popular. My father has always worked quite hard on the quality of the beer. You have to see it like this today. In Belgium, in all, I think I can say that we're the number one reference for traditional Geuze, which is called Oude Geuze. Oude means I think Alte. It means traditional. It's the traditional style. It's a protected name also by the EU today. Same for Oude Kriek. We've always worked very hard on the quality of the beer. In the 60s and 70s, you can make with very, let's say, primitive installations. You can make a nice beer. You can make a nice bottle of Geuze, but the what people expect in beer, in quality, in food. I mean, not everyone is going to maybe say, I'm not a good taster. I can describe the taste and so on. Perhaps they say this, but they definitely can. They will make a decision in their head. I like this. I don't like this. This is in a way very basically how you taste something. And the degree in quality that you need to reach in Belgium for beer is so high because there's so much quality beer that as a brewery to survive, you need to make top quality beer because someone else will come by with another top quality beer. And so the consumer is used to drinking very good beer. And so the consumer is very, very severe. It's very, very well taught to drink good beer. Now, this is important to keep in mind. So we focus always on this. And so today, we sell most of our beer still in Belgium, in the region. We sell 70% of our beer in Belgium. That being said, we're not the biggest brewery. We're a brewery, make about 20,000 hectoliters per year. I can say that it's a big brewery between the smaller ones, and it's a small brewery between the bigger ones. It's somewhere in between. We are like we could grow a little bit, and then we're still between the bigger breweries, and we could stay where we are, and then we're part still of the smaller breweries. We're somewhere there.
Middle-sized brewery.
It's a typical middle-sized brewery. Yeah, exactly. But then, of course, we're mostly focusing on Oude Geuze. So we brew beer. It's indeed an important aspect. So we're brewers, and we brew the beer, but we're also blenders. So we have a brew house where we have an automatic brew house to make Lambic beer, spontaneous fermentation. So the beer is brewed according to the turbid mash method, and it will go into a cool ship. It's an open vessel, open to the air. And so after boiling the beer will cool down on this vessel, and fresh air from outside, and we will open windows. We will start a ventilator to create an air current. And with the fresh air from outside, we will get wild yeasts from the outside environment, from the region, that will go into the beer, and they will start spontaneously fermenting this beer. And this is typical for Lambic beer. This is typical for, gives a typical flavor for the beers in the region. There's not many Lambic producers, but they're all in this region. And this is the method we still follow. And after this, after brewing, we'll and letting the beer cool down on the cool ship for about 5 hours, we will put it in large oak casks, foeders we call them. So these large oak casks going between 4,000 liters and 27,000 liters each. It will age in these foeders for 1, 2, or 3 years. And then we have, of course, we've been working, the brewery has been operational for more than 40 years now. We have a nice stock of Lambic beer between 1, 2, and 3 years old. We have one foeder now that is actually 4 years old. We're going to use it for something special, but that's quite exceptional. And then comes the blending, because when you make Geuze, and like what we have ready here for tasting, Geuze, Mariage, Brevet, this is a blend of 90% 3-year-old Lambic and 10% 1-year-old Lambic. And the 3-year-old Lambic is Lambic that was aged on the foeders for 3 years. So it's not only it does not only have the yeast from the cool ship where it was inoculated after brewing first 3 years ago, but it also has the nice evolved yeast from the microflora inside the oak casks. So in the oak casks, in the wood, you have a microflora. And this is why we also keep using the same cask over and over again. Most of the casks we used for Mariage Brevet are between, I think, easily 50, but also 100 years old. The oldest one is 137 years old now, I think. As far as we know, the oldest one. These have always been used for Lambic, and they get very soft, mellow tastes, very round taste. Somewhat maybe.
Hold on a second. Let's open this bottle now, because now I get really thirsty. You know, you're explaining it so well. So let's open this bottle and then we continue talking about.
I do agree. I will explain the method for pouring a little bit, maybe.
Yes. Also, you know.
So always keep the bottle straight up when it's standing straight up. Don't shake the bottle. Don't look at the sediment and these kind of things. You have to keep the sediment of the bottle at the bottom of the bottle, because when we pour the beer, we want it to be clear. So we pour gently. We can make a nice head on it. You take your time, but you'll see, and you make a sort of a nice mountain on it, and it's a clear beer. This is important. If you pour Geuze, it needs to be like this. If you're holding the bottle, and a lot of people do this when they're pouring beer. They read the label, they will turn the bottle, they will look at the bottom of the thing, and they will look at, and then shake the bottle so much, and then they open it, they pour it, and then they say, this is all hazy, and you can't see through it, and then the taste is off too, because in a Geuze, the taste we have in mind when pouring the beer is a taste of the beer without the sediment. When you drink the beer, it should be the beer without the sediment. Mm-hmm. You can add it. People sometimes like it too. It's a personal preference, but it gives some bitter components. Which often mostly come from aged hops that we use in the beer. These are absorbed by the yeast, let's say, and those are there, and so that's less refined as a flavor. Sometimes people do like it, and then if you do, of course, add the sediment, no problem. But to have it
a little bit similar, sorry to interrupt you, then it's a little bit similar to Hefeweizenbier, to German style Hefeweizenbier.
Yes.
But then it's also up to you, if you want the settlements inside the glass or if you want to pour it clear. But then the next point is, maybe my beer is also wrong, because I only put it out from the fridge 10 minutes ago, so it's not completely clear, because it took some time to settle, and it's quite hard to see, but you can see still, there's something going on in the bottle. But then tell us, what is your recommendation? Store the bottle up front, or
Yeah.
Should the bottle lay, or when the bottle lay, how many minutes before the tasting we should put it up, you know, that all the settlements are settled down again?
First of all, cheers.
Cheers. Thanks again, Karel. Enjoy.
What I did, and I'll just say what I did. This bottle, if you put it too cold, and we write on the back label degrees Celsius, you should drink it. Now this is you have to keep in mind, if you put beer very cold like this beer, you will get what we call a sort of cold haziness. So this is also possible that there is some haziness in the beer because it's very cold. That's not necessarily the sediment, it's just the beer that becomes hazy because it's very cold. Now that's one thing. If you drink it too cold, some flavors are not going to express themselves as nicely. So it's important, first of all, to follow the temperature that we put in the bottle. You will see certainly between, it's crazy detail perhaps, and I don't think that many people will look at it, but even with some of the specials that we make, the mono blends, the VAT number 44, number 79, and so on. If you look between different back labels, you'll even see that sometimes the temperature will differ. That we will say, like this one, we noticed, you know, it's more like this, and then we say, okay, drink it at this temperature. This is going to be perfect. But that's maybe very, very snobbish of us to do this, but it's our advice to serve it as good as possible. That's one thing. Now, but what's very important is the way you keep the bottle. We say, and you will see this is a Belgian label, but you have the export label, but it's the same thing. You will see it says don't put it laying down.
It's the same.
Yeah, exactly. And this is something that you know, you don't have it on the export.
Yeah, we have it. We have it here. Oh, yeah. It's here.
What yeah, there you go. It's something that's you know, you can put the bottle down, no problem. But we say don't do it. The reason why you should put it down is if you keep it for a very long time and you really only notice much difference. We can say out of experience is like after 6 years. So that's quite a bit of time. So if you keep it straight up, you have one advantage, that is that when you want to taste it, you can immediately open it and drink it. Because if you have it lying down, you have to really, I mean, it's also possible, but you have to really be careful to keep the bottle laying down when you take it out your cellar, to move it like this. And this is why you have the serving baskets as well, which is something very complicated to explain to a lot of people. So it's not something we use in bars and so on, because it's too much explanation otherwise. That's why we say just keep it standing straight up so the sediment is here. Because if you do it like this, there will be sediment here in the bottle, and it will stick to the bottle. And so if you take a bottle like this out of your cellar, and suddenly you say, okay, I put it straight, suddenly all this will go in the beer. And if you open it then you have a nice blend between the sediment and the beer, and it's not what we want you to taste. It's not the final product as it should be. So then we say, put it straight up, and 2 weeks in advance. It has a time to settle down. It needs time to do this.
2 weeks, you recommend?
2 weeks is the best, but that's the minimum, you know?
And wait, hold on a second. So Konrad, we are writing a comment, you know, because I asked this question and he was writing already. Immediately he came up with, it takes 1 week. So Konrad, you are right. But Karl is telling us if we want to get it properly settled, all the settlements, then it takes 2 weeks, which is new for me, to be honest. That's new for me.
And yeah, I probably have to communicate about this even more. But you know, keep in mind that we wait more than 3 years to finish this beer, so 2 weeks is nothing.
Yeah, but consumption-wise, you know, when you want to drink.
This is why we say keep the bottle straight up. We put them in crates or in boxes, depending on where it goes to, and it's always straight up. Also for bars, we sell a lot of our Geuze in bars here in Belgium. You go to a bar, I think we can say about 1 out of 3 bars in Belgium has Geuze Boon. Okay, and so this is a large clientele of us, a lot of customers. And in a bar, you can't be planning all these bottles standing up, and then, you know, if they're laying down, you'll take them laying down, stand up, serve them like this, and then you don't have the beer as it should be. So you just make it so that you have to keep the bottle straight. There's also some technical aspects of about the beer. You can say laying down is better. And we actually have bottles at the brewery, also the Mariage Parfait bottles, these small ones. We keep them laying down first at the brewery. And this has to do with the fermentation technicality that we prefer to have them laying down first. Then we put them up straight, but then it's okay. After this, there's no reason anymore to put them down or up, unless you're going to age for a long time. But this is a technicality. I can go in some detail there, but also not a lot. It's
is it infecting the cork a little bit? Doesn't matter if it's getting dry and drier, or if is it also good if it's getting a little bit, you know, if it's not getting too dry and if it's a little bit in contact with the liquid, or is this something you really don't want to have if you especially age the products?
No, the cork, these let's say more these corks, they are made so that they can stay well with or without liquid touching them. They are you can actually feel it. They're quite compressed. You have different types of cork. In wine, you will still find a lot of wineries that will use corks, and they use. Sometimes there's a whole story about the authentic cork and these kind of things, but you have to keep the cork wet, so put the bottle down. In those cases, probably often you have to do this. But with this type of cork, you can have it standing straight up or put it lying down. This will seal the bottle just like a crown cap. This is perfectly gas tight. And also the cork does not need to get wet. I mean, you can make it wet down, but it's not necessarily making it.
Okay.
No.
Karel, hold on a second. Stefan is asking, is it possible that kind, or that your beers, or especially Lambic beers, can get a little bit of a taste of cork, which we know from wine, that sometimes, you know, wine can smell or taste from the cork. Is it possible also with that kind of beers?
Normally, I can't say that you can get this today, but if you get this in wine, it will have to do with the type of cork, because corks themselves, there's the name slips my mind right now, but there's a typical molecule that you will taste, which you will say, this is a cork flavor, and the producers of cork will make sure that this molecule is not in the cork anymore, so that it cannot go into the liquid. But if you use certain types of cork, which some wine producers still prefer, the certain types of corks that are produced still have this technicality. Mostly those are the cheaper corks. These are a bit more expensive to prevent also this effect.
Okay, yeah. Cool. Then he's also asking, best-selling product for you?
Best-selling product is Oude Boon.
Okay.
Oude Boon in the corked bottle, 375. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about the aroma. What you can find, which kind of aromas?
Yeah, for me, this is the one I'm drinking here is a perfect example of a Mariage Parfait. It's what I was saying a little bit about the fooders, and the ones that we use for this beer, for blending, the lambic that we use for blending in this beer, typically has something, and you can taste it here, like slightly phenolic and smoky, like whiskey. This is something that we do like in the lambic for Mariage Parfait. At the same time, you have some perhaps some wine-like characteristics, some fruitiness, like wine-like fruitiness, and they have this kind of blend or crossing point between whiskey and wine in this beer.
Okay.
And this is for Mariage Parfait, we will always be looking like for this certain typical pattern when we're blending lambic. So when you're lambic for making this beer, we will look always for this type of crossing point in the lambic as a typical Mariage Parfait character. and then we will use that in the blend, and you can really taste it here. It's typical, like an old Lambic beer character, but you only get it from those foeders that we've been using for a very long time too. So it's makes it a bit selective, but it makes a very rich, very. You also have nice carbonation in it, which opens up everything, and you get a sort of with this also, it goes a bit towards, the people sometimes say the champagne of beer. So it's a
that's a good explanation. Yeah, because it's dry. It's something. There's coming a question. From Wolfgang is asking. 2016. What does it mean? Is it the year of the oldest footer, or is it the year when you blend it? So what is this? For what stays 2016?
Yeah. So I think on the because I have a Belgian bottle in front of me, and the labels for export sometimes have something in English written, maybe not in other languages. But you will see on the neck label it says 2016, and underneath it's written Brouwjahr. I think in German you can just say Brouwjahr. It's the same word.
Perfect. We can also do it in German then.
I can speak only a little bit.
No, it's fine.
No, but the 2016 in the case of Mariage Parfait is the brewing year, the Brouwjahr, of the oldest Lambic in the blend. So this 2016, you will see typically then it is bottled in 2019. And you can actually deduct this if you look at the best before, or at least the bottle you will see ends on a 9, 2039 it should be, I think. So this was 38. So it probably have a small overlap there. Most of you see it's like close, but this bottled with beer that is 3 years old, and so it will be mostly. Yeah, no, yours is switching. Mine here is 2016, and this batch was bottled in May 2019. But it's from brew year 2016, and so this is the same the way it's done. You will see this also with our Oude Geuze. Then we will not put one date. Then we will say 2016, 2017, 2016, 17. This is for practical reasons. We make so much Oude Geuze that it's not easy to keep track of which one was. I mean, we know which foeders was made when, but you have to imagine you have to order labels which you put on bottles, and so it's easier to make a label that fits for one brewing season, because one brewing season for us spans from September to April. This is 2 years, 16, 17, let's say. And so it is on the Oude Geuze bottle. The beer for that bottle, the 2-year-old Lambic, was brewed in that season. Not a 2-year-old, not a 3-year-old Lambic. It's a bit of a tricky.
It's quite complex.
But the most important Lambic in this blend is the 2-year-old Lambic for the Oude Geuze.
Okay. So next question is coming from Konrad. Back to the cork, is this gas tight over 2 or 3 decades as well, the cork?
I'm sorry, is it gas tight, but?
Yes, about 2 or 3 decades. If the cork, stays tight, gas tight, if gas is not coming out or in, so air, and if it's staying over 2 or 3 decades.
Okay, yeah. In principle, it should stay good for a long time. So this is why we say you can at least keep the bottle for 20 years. I know bottles that have stayed better for longer. It's a bit tricky in that case, because 20 years ago, this type of cork was not entirely there yet. So, but this, so far we can say 20 years, definitely, yeah.
Okay, it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. What you will see with older bottles is that so that this part that was inside the bottle is maybe even finer. It's because of the pressure inside the bottle that builds up over the years. It's pressed even finer. That you will maybe see, but you will also see that here it stays the same, also around this edge here. So it's still gas tight. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Any food recommendations?
Geuze always goes good with well, it's maybe a bit fancy, but this one also, it's my father would say oysters.
Okay.
If you like cheese, one very good one, it's the contrast. It's if go for a blue cheese.
Okay.
Nice contrast. The one we would always go to is a Stilton blue cheese. It goes very nicely. It's also a bit of within the blue cheese is a bit of a mellow one, but it combines quite well. Yeah.
Oh.
But then, yeah, if for a general rule perhaps could be this could go very well with fish dishes. Generally, it's you can combine it quite well. Also with salmon and grilled salmon, for example, you can have some nice dishes with compare it. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I can imagine it with the blue cheese, but I already had this tasting, that kind of tasting, with the Geuze and blue cheese, and it goes really, really well. No, I completely agree. No, it's nice. Really... And especially for those people who are tasting it for the first time, it's kind of completely different taste when it comes to beer, but yeah.
Yeah, if you're not used to drinking Geuze, this is perhaps your reaction is, wow, this is definitely something else. Something you can typically remark is it has a sour taste. It has a relatively high acidity, but it's important to note that it does not have a higher acidity than, let's say, a white wine. And in this taste, in this perspective, it's important to keep in mind you should not say you're drinking beer. Obviously, it is a beer, but compare it with white wine as well. Think about wine, and then you're going to understand a little bit the flavors and the acidity as well. You can appreciate it more. Drink it within this mindset, and then you start knowing and appreciating the flavors. While, well, of course, it's also a beer. For me, I will drink it more as a beer, large glass and
regularly. Yeah. You're used to drink it, yeah.
Geuze, for some people I know people who just drink it like, oh, I like this, and they're they drink it, and then they drink it very often. Others, they're like the first time, no, I don't like it, and then they give you back the glass, and they're like, 2 times later they try sometimes, yeah, and then after a couple of months, you see them drinking nothing else.
Yeah, they are falling then completely in love. Yeah.
Acquired taste also for a lot of people. So, but there's a lot in it. You have to look further than just the first reaction of maybe if your reaction is, what's this? Try to look a little bit deeper, concentrate on what you're tasting, because there's so much there. It's a very complex beer. It makes it a bit weird, but it makes it very interesting to drink and keeps it enjoyable over time.
No, I like it. Personally, I like it.
Me too. Cheers.
Cool thing. Okay. I would say now we go straight forward to the fruit beers, and we will taste the second beer.
Yes.
Which is
the Kriek Boon. I have it here as well.
Yeah, perfect. Kriek Boon is the next beer. So I would say we open it, and then you explain us a little bit from where the taste comes from. Are there cherries inside, or what kind of cherries are inside? Is it straight only cherries, or is there maybe some other kind of flavors, fruits inside? So.
Yeah. Okay.
The same rule go for also the fruit beers which we had for the Geuze.
Yeah. For Kriek and for Framboise, these beers are not bottle conditioned. So you will have a sediment for beers that are bottle conditioned. Okay. The Kriek beer and the Framboise, the next one, are not bottle conditioned. So they don't have a sediment such as you'll have maybe some sediment, but not like the other beers. The Oude Kriek, Schaarbeekse Oude Kriek, the Mariage Perfect Kriek, later, they also have a sediment. So also there, keep it straight. Don't shake the bottle. Okay. Be gentle. So this is our second most selling beer that we have. Traditionally, fruit beers. I don't know how well known fruit beers would be in Austria. I don't think it's a typical beer tradition there.
Not really, not really. To be honest, no.
But here, fruit beers. It is a certain. Today, it's very well known, but let's say 50 years ago, it was like something for fun. That was often done certainly by lambic blenders and lambic brewers. They would have cherries from the harvest, and it would be something they would make once a year. Ferment the cherries from the harvest with the beer, and then have what you call cherry lambic, which is perhaps a flat beer, but it's something nice. It's a sort of a folly, a fun beer. It was something typical that was done. So there was a certain always been this certain way of combining fruit and certain mostly cherries, but sometimes also raspberries. Definitely, there's also been experiments many years ago already with different types of fruit, but mostly cherries and raspberries were used for this. Cheers again.
Cheers.
So the Kriek is something that, compared to the Geuze, you're talking about something else in a way. In the flavor file, the fact that I put the Geuze mash bière first in this tasting because it's not a fruit beer was a nice opener. Like, oh,
there's come something different tonight. It's a different kind of tasting, huh?
Exactly. Now we're all going to taste our fruit beers. You will see we mostly use cherries. And these what we do, it's very important. We've always put the focus, and still do, and stress this. It's very important to stress. We work with whole fruit. So this is cherries with the pits and everything. And these will be added to 1-year-old lambic in a fermentation vessel, a tank. And in that, it will ferment together for a week or maybe more, depending on what we're trying to achieve. And this will give us cherry lambic. And then in a second stage, we would blend this cherry lambic with older lambics from different fooders, with some young lambic perhaps for this Kriek also. We had some young lambic that still contains a lot of soft, young flavors, some softness there. We blend that and then bottle it or put it in a keg for draft beer. That is Karel Boon. The cherries that we use about 250 grams of cherries per liter. And for all the cherry beers after this, not for all. For the Oude Kriek and the Kriek Mariage parfait after this, it will be 400 grams of cherries. Now, it's a lot of cherries. It's a very expensive ingredient too. So it's not very very practical if you want to make a beer that is let's say cheaper or more widely available. So you will see from other producers alternatives being used, such as concentrates, to which they have to add lots of sugars and these kind of things to build this taste up and to make sure that it has some expression. Now, you can always add some sugar to a beer, and to this Kriek we also add still a little bit of sugar to express a little bit extra the fruit flavor from a cherry, but not as much as you need to add it to a concentrated beer. But the beer with concentrates is a whole lot of process. It's more like a cocktail, a beer lemonade, let's say. Here we have a process of fermenting the cherries with the beer. It's similar to it's the same type of fermentation you have with grapes for wine, for example. And this is more in a natural process where in the end, also for tasting, you will have a more real flavor. And what we're trying to achieve is a flavor of picking a cherry from a tree and get this flavor. And you will experience today also with the other cherries that there's different perspectives towards the cherry expression like this. But the Kriek we're drinking now is a typical example for what we call ourselves the more regular Kriek, the one that you drink very cold at 4-6 degrees Celsius in the sun This is the one that will be drunk a lot on draft at festivals here in the region. At the Carnival event, people drink a lot of this Kriek as well. It's a bit of a party beer, perhaps for the local people. But it's an easy drinking Kriek, and it's very enjoyable. I still like it myself a lot as well. So that is Kriek Boon. But this one is the non bottle conditioned version. Later you'll taste the more bottle conditions, the bottle conditioned version, the Oude, and then you'll see it becomes more complex in flavor because of the bottle conditioning.
Mm-hmm. Question for me personally is all the Krieks, from where you get all these Krieks?
Yeah.
The fruits are coming from?
The cherries for this Kriek come from Poland. Southern Poland, formerly Galicia, a region. They have there are still a lot of nice cherry varieties there, and it's a variety that we found my father found this in the 90s. We have one beer in the tasting today, the Schaarbeekse Oude Kriek. For reference, I'll take the bottle. This one here, later in the tasting, this one is not made with, this is the only one not made with the Polish cherries. This one is made with Belgian Schaarbeekse cherries. Now, the reason we don't use only Belgian cherries is simply because we need about 300 tons of cherries per year. Yeah, and you don't have it in Belgium, and you need to look at pricing because, as I say, it's an expensive ingredient. The cherries cost more than the beer itself. I mean, if you just look at the price of cherries, it costs more per liter than everything else of the beer. Mm-hmm. So it's really very relevant. Aspect is the price. So this is.
But Poland, especially Poland, is really well known for cherries, apples. A lot of fruits are grown there, so there's nothing speaks against, buy the cherries from Poland. It's
they have very, very high quality cherries. So, but we are working on also some projects where we are going to harvest more cherries here in Belgium, and that's specifically the Schaarbeekse cherry. But that does not mean we want to exclude the Polish cherry, because this cherry gives a nice flavor. It gives a fantastic aroma. It's good to work with. Yeah.
It's a nice beer. So Wolfgang is asking, is a Kriek without sugar drinkable?
A Kriek without sugar. So everything else. So this Kriek here that we have here, we can. It contains some extra sugar to open up the cherry flavor. If you don't have the sugar, yes, it's perfectly drinkable. It's even very enjoyable. The only problem would be that because people mostly drink this beer next to other things, that they're drinking just let's say a regular Pils beer, and then they drink something else, and then they drink a Kriek, because there's no added sugar. In this case, perhaps it seem a little bit flat in taste. We have always been working on lowering the sugar that we need to add by improving the way that we make the Kriek. And there is one big improvement that we're going to make normally this year. We are working on a new installation to improve the fermentation process, to limit oxygen pickup, to get more fruity expression from the fruit itself. Mm-hmm. So if you have oxygen pickup in beer, so if beer in the process of making it touches oxygen will actually be an enemy. It will oxidize flavors, and oxidized flavors will give you quick aging of beer. And in this case, the aging, because it's not bottle conditioned, will be not good. Mm-hmm. It will be, you'll get more, it goes too fast towards Madeira flavors and other things which are actually not ideal. Okay. And so if with the new fermentation vessel, we will be able to use the residual sugars of the cherries much better as well. We will be able to stop the fermentation at a certain point. And then say, okay, this is perfect, and then you have the residual sugars of the beer, which actually of the cherries, which will support the flavor itself. So we will, at this ideal point, we can do this with adding. Probably we'll still need to add a little bit of sugar to make it to make sure that if compared to other drinks in the market, it still stands ground. But it needs to it will stand on its own much better even. Now, if you look at Oude Kriek, no, there is no sugar added in this. This gets all its expressive flavors from the re-fermentation in bottle. And this re-fermentation in bottle is not to be underestimated. It's something very important to get a very complex but extra flavors, more body in a beer. But then you need complexity. You will get also complexity in flavor. And then for a beer like the Kriek that we're drinking right now, complexity is not always what the person who drinks the beer is seeking. I mean, we all can enjoy very complex, nice beers, but sometimes at the end of the day, you say, just give me a Pilsner, you know?
Yeah. Something easy in taste, something easy going, you know, with a high drinkability. Yeah. But it was a good question with a really great answer. Then there's another question from Jan van Leere. Hopefully I pronounced this right. How is the bottle fermentation performed? Adding additional yeast or relying on this still active yeast from 1 year old Lambic?
So we rely on the active yeast from the 1 year old Lambic. So by blending the 1 year old Lambic into the whole blend, which contains the older Lambics, and I'm sorry, I'm switching a few things. The 1 year old Lambic will add the sugars, sorry, but the older Lambic will add, well, the young Lambic will also add some yeast perhaps, but the older Lambic, the wild yeasts in this beer, they don't die really quick. They become, let's say, inactive, and they can live off of very little things. So let's say, look at it this way: you have yeast in beer, and you have the sugar that's the sugar. There's different types of sugars, but let's call it just sugar in general, that feeds the yeast. The yeast will work on this to transform it into nice aromas, but also in alcohol and CO2. But then all the sugar, it shrinks, there is almost nothing left. And then for a lot of yeast, normally yeast will say, okay, it's all gone, and they die. Now for the wild yeasts, typically Brettanomyces yeasts, they will also work on this sugar. There will be less and less sugar left, but they will be able to work on very complex sugar molecules. So I said there's different types of sugar. Wild yeasts like Brettanomyces yeasts, which we have in our beer, they will work on these very complex molecules and take their time. It will take a lot of time to work on these, so they can live for a long time of almost nothing. And so with old Lambic, 3-year-old Lambic, you will have inactive or almost inactive yeasts, very slowly working. And by blending these yeasts together with the young beer that contains also still a lot of unfermented sugar, together you will get a re-fermentation in the bottle. And this re-fermentation, well, it starts these yeasts coming from the old beer suddenly have all this food for them. They will reactivate much faster. In the first weeks in the bottle, you get a nice re-fermentation, very active in the first weeks. If you taste week on week, you taste a lot of evolution. It's a very interesting tasting to do as well. Of course, you can only do it at the brewery, but that is how it works. So we work with the yeast from the beer that is already in there, and by blending it, we make sure that we get the right amount of sugar and yeast in it. So for this, we also do lab analysis to make sure that it all works out.
Okay. Cool. So it's a really complex thing, yeah, but it makes sense, you know. Young Lambic, old Lambic react, and then you can react the old yeast, you know, with adding the new Lambic. Yeah, no, it's quite complex.
Yeah, and just to conclude the whole story, as I said, this one, the regular Kriek is not bottle conditioned. It is not in the bottle. It's not pasteurized. We have no pasteurization tunnel at the brewery for bottles, so we could not even do it. But we centrifuge the beer. So we will centrifuge out the yeast. So they will always still, because it's centrifuged, you will still find some sediment, but only very limited in the beer. But most of the cells are centrifuged out, not enough to actually get re-fermentation going.
Okay. Okay.
And this is how the Kriek and the Framboise are made to stay as an bottle conditioned beer. Yeah.
Perfect. Let's go to the Framboise.
Yes. Luckily, I brought enough glasses.
I too. I have enough glasses, so
I have a huge glass collection, so
then it's perfect. From every single festival, you can use the glasses now. Yeah, when you collect the glasses, it makes sense. Use them now for the tasting.
Perfect. Nice sound.
Yeah, it's a really nice sound. So that's the third beer for tonight. It's Framboise.
Yes. So the Framboise is French for raspberry. But what is raspberry in German?
Himbeer. Himbeere.
Himbeere, exactly.
Yeah.
Good. That's why I keep my languages
A little bit trained, yeah?
to a certain level, yeah.
Oh.
Cheers.
Cheers, cheers.
Now, you told me, before we did the tasting, you told me which vintages you have of all the beers. I have made sure to get all the same vintages here at my own at home. You were able to send them to everyone, I suppose, but I had to go in our collection and grab each bottle. I did this also for the Framboise. There is one important note I want to make here. It's a very difficult thing with Framboise, and that is it's a beer. The fresher you drink it, the better, because raspberries are such delicate fruit. And then again, it comes to the topic of oxygen pickup. That with any oxygen pickup in the production process, aging will become a problem.
Okay.
And so this is definitely, I'm drinking it, I'm enjoying this beer a lot. Mm-hmm. Now, but at the same time, I'm very critical of our own beer, so that's that's a good thing, I suppose.
Yeah, but the best thing.
If you drink it fresh, and this is something probably we achieve the best with kegged beer. Maybe not today with the coronavirus thing going on, but with kegged beer, we have a very nice rotation, and then you notice the beers on when it's very fresh, you get the expression almost exactly. If you go to a bush of raspberries, you pick it from the bush and put it in. It's that precisely.
Okay. That's good to know.
Now this is made completely it's made like the Kriek. We add 30%, so 300 grams of raspberries per liter. We also add 5%, so that's 50 grams of cherries per liter to this as well. Now the cherries are added because they give some roundness to the beer, whereas raspberries alone would be a bit too sharp.
Okay.
Cherries add some.
So the cherries make it rounder, more complex and more round, and
so for this reason we always add a little bit of cherries as well to this beer. But then other than that, it's perfect beer if you drink it very cool, very very light. Very at 4 or 6 degrees Celsius, it's a fantastic thirst quencher. And now also after some time, now you have a 2017 vintage. I don't know exactly which bottling date you guys will have precisely.
It's 4th of February.
Yeah, 4th of February. Yeah. Okay. So it's okay. That is.
The best before that is 21.
Okay. Mine, the one I'm drinking is older. Mine is a 2020 10.7, so that makes sense because that makes sense.
So it's not overdated yet. So it's still.
No.
So it's still.
No, that would not make sense. Otherwise, I would have heard it from you, I think.
No, it's fine.
But you get the aging you will get in such a beer. As I said, also with the Kriek, but you can taste it perhaps a little bit here. It's getting some more Madeira flavors in it over time. But that is perhaps not the most positive aging, but okay, it's still a very it can be a nice flavor over time, and it's still a very nice beer to drink. But ideally, it's a beer that you drink fresh, and that's a good thirst quencher. So also, if you say like I like this beer very much, and you want to say okay, I want to drink this at home all the time, then I would say honestly, I would say buy a crate and put a crate in your garage and drink it like this. It's probably better to buy 6 bottles instead of a crate, so that you have a better rotation on the beer to get the freshest possible flavors. For this one, it's one where I stress it a little bit because it's just for me personally something where I really enjoy the framboise, but it's just so damn good when it's fresh that I just want to have people drink it as fresh as possible, as much as possible. So that's why I'm sharing this info too.
Okay. It's a good information, which is really helpful. So there's a question coming from Roland. With Lambic, we are talking a lot about yeast.
Yeah.
Such Bruxellensis. But what about the malt? Which kinds are involved? What kind of malts are you using?
It's a very good question, because indeed Lambic is very well known for being a spontaneously fermented beer. So it's always about spontaneous fermentation, about the yeast, and about the fact that it's perhaps a bit more sour. And as brewers, for us, it's not only about this. It's yeast is important, but malts, hops, everything, wheat in our case is also important. Now, the malt that we use, I can't say exactly what we use, simply because we don't want to share all the information.
Okay.
But the malt that we use today is what we personally call lambic malt. And why do we call it that? It's because we ask the malter to make the malt to our specification. So in the brewing process that we follow, we have fine-tuned the way that the malt should be malted. We will also look at the grains themselves before they're malted to get the quality control there, to figure out all the different specifications there. So we're not just looking at, we're not just calling like, hello, malt, can we get some extra kilograms in here because we need to brew next week? It doesn't work this way. We will look at the harvest, the quality of the harvest, select what we need, and then ask to get this malted to our own specification and to the best specification to make this type of beer. And there is always I think you can for beer always say perhaps malting when you need malt. There's probably you can really specify towards a certain type of beer. And this is and it immediately brings me to also saying that when making a brewery, a Lambic brewery, you often or any brewery today, maybe Markus, you will know that I've said this before, but you build your brewery around your beer style. We don't look at it like a kitchen where you say, okay, we have a list of all these types of beer, and okay, yesterday we made an IPA, today we'll make a stout, and tomorrow maybe we'll make a lambic, and the day after that we'll make a Kölsch, and then we'll make. You can do this, and you can probably follow the styles, but what's important is if you make a brewery, you build your entire brewery around one style, you can really make the best in that one style, and that's what we're trying to do. So also with ingredients, we will select ingredients that are the best to make lambic beer. Also with hops, we use aged hops. These are hops that are at least 2 years of age. Why? Not because we don't want citrusy flavors or fresh hop flavors in lambic beer. These would be a bit strange in the flavor. They would get, you know, they would you know, crash with all the other flavors. So what we look for in hop is simply the bacteriostatic effect, so the effect of protecting the beer, protecting the yeast over time. So as a protective for preserving the beer. But and maybe a little bit to add some complexity. You will always get some bitterness perhaps from hops. So you still need to look at the taste that it creates, and then there's a little bit of bitterness. It can be nice for complexity, but also again it needs balance, so not too much. So all this needs to be balanced with all, not just in brewing, but also with ingredients, brewing, everything after this, with the fooders, and then blending, of course. Everything needs balance. So it's not only, of course, and that's why I think it's a nice question, Roland, because it's it brings me to explain immediately also a few other things about the beer in a few words. It's not only about yeasts and it's about so much more as well. It's making beer itself is complex, but I think Lambic beer and Geuze and these fruit beers are probably the most complex beers there are to make.
The malt is coming from Belgium, so there's a maltery which is making this specific Lambic malt for you.
It's a malting in Belgium, but the grains come from it can vary Germany or France.
But the maltery is in Belgium.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, which makes sense. Yeah.
But it will depend on harvest. I mean, there is also often today this idea of I mentioned it a little bit with the cherries. The idea of you need to work with local ingredients and short chain and these kind of things. I think it is important to make logistical chains not too long. I mean, for me, it does not make sense to harvest, let's say, what can you harvest? A stupid example, maybe, probably not how it works, but okay, you get shrimps from the ocean, and then you send shrimps to some country where you have cheap labor on the other side of the world to get them cleaned, and then you send them back all the way to the site, sell them at a low price. These are things that I indeed don't think are what the world should be doing. But when it comes to beer, there's always, to make quality beer, you have to get quality ingredients, and buying local ingredients. Local does not mean necessarily quality. Local means that it's local. That's what it means. It means that some less traffic created perhaps, and that is nice. So if you can make quality locally, that's a good thing. But you need quality ingredients locally as well, and that is not always a case. Or you can get quality, but not for the type of product you're making. Maybe there is good quality for, let's say, some nice blonde triple beer, but not the right Lambic. And so it's important to look at these things as well. It's just something I want to add here, because there's this idea that local dominates, but it's,
if it's possible, then it's okay, but if you're not find the right quality, as you already mentioned, then it doesn't make sense, to get it as local as possible, because you need especially the best quality you can get for your own products, and that's
exactly. And I think I can make some link towards just buying bottles of beer. I mean, there's definitely high quality beers from Austria too. Beers that actually some great beers from Austria too. But if you want Lambic beer, well, you have to look in Belgium.
Yeah, that's true. If you want a proper Märzen or a really good lager beer, then you have to come to Austria, and we can give you one of the best Märzens you can get, and best lager beers. Yeah, I completely agree. The same thing is with hop forward beers, for example. When you can get a West Coast IPA, which is super fresh, nothing speaks against, But of course, if it's too old, then it doesn't make sense, at all.
Yeah, and it's to do with varieties. It's to do with even the terrain on which your ingredients are growing. I mean, Even let's just give a stupid example of maybe tomatoes. I mean, you go to the supermarket, you buy a tomato, you don't think about it, but even a tomato, you can have qualities in it, and you can have very juicy, nice, full tasting tomatoes, and you have those who are like, what the hell am I eating? Is this a tomato? It tastes like water.
Yeah, it's the same with cucumbers. I always tell my wife at home, you know, we don't have to eat tomatoes during the winter time, you know, because they are tasting like, doesn't make sense at all, you know. Wait for the fresh ones. We've grown locally, and then it's a completely different experience.
Exactly. And so this works with the soil is important, on which things grow, and so perhaps in a certain region somewhere you have very good soil, and if the time for harvest is there, then right that moment you get the perfect tomatoes from that region, and they're perhaps the best in the world. But it has to do with the soil, perhaps. And that's probably also why wines have a certain reputation from certain regions, originally at least. Certainly, yeah. And for beer, for hops, it's all irrelevant.
Always the same.
Yeah.
Karel, we go to the next beer.
All right.
Yes, I'm looking forward to tasting this one.
I'm following the comments section as well.
Okay, that's good. Is there a new? Markus is asking. There's a question from Markus. Do you get the water from Zenne?
Yeah. No. So the Zenne actually does flow right through our brewery. We have buildings on both sides of the Zenne River, but we use water from a well, and we have a well at 40 meters underground, from which we use water.
Okay.
So perhaps there is some water there that used to be in the Zenne, but of course
that was a nice move. It's champagne and it's bottle conditioned.
There you go.
No, it's perfect. Everything is fine. It was a cool effect for all the listeners.
This is why I do this all the time. I keep my hand on the.
So it was my fault as well.
Now this one is a special one. They're all special, I suppose, but this one is extra special. This the Oude Kriek harvest. So the year on the neck label for the fruit beers always mentions the year in which the fruit is harvested. So this is with cherries harvested in 2018. This beer was bottled, if I'm not wrong, in 3rd of April. We only made one batch, so it's we are all drinking the same beer, the exact same beer right now. This was made with Schaarbeekse cherries, and the Schaarbeekse cherry is a Belgian variety, also harvested in Belgium. Okay. So this is one where we do indeed go towards the local product. But the thing with Schaarbeekse cherries is that they're like what's a good comparison? They're like the Pinot Noir of cherries. They're a very high quality cherry. They are very intense. They're quite cheers, by the way.
Cheers.
They're very intense, and you will immediately notice we're going a step further from what we just tasted from Kriek and Framboise. We're going to something, again, a little bit more. The acidity comes up maybe a little bit more because we use more aged beers. There's more complexity. This is bottle conditioned also. But the Schaarbeekse cherry, as I said, is in intensity. So we have 250 grams of cherries also in this beer, but we get a lot more flavor. And the cherries, the Schaarbeekse, they have a nice finish too. No after bitterness, no unpleasant after bitterness. A nice round finish, nothing astringent. Some vanilla notes in there, and this makes a nice round typical. Also, actually, quite perhaps an easier drinking Kriek. But this is why the Schaerbeekse cherry is quite renowned also in Belgium. It's very renowned in Belgium as the cherry to use for Kriek beer. But the only problem is that they're not harvested in large quantities anymore. Maybe they weren't even, I'm not sure about quantities in the past, but either way, as I said, we use 300 tons of cherries per year. And if we get the numbers of the harvest of this type of cherry, it's maybe only 1 year, I think 2018, I think it was only 20 tons of cherries. So 20 tons of cherries, and if you know we need 300 in a year, it's a big difference. So in all our beers with this type of cherries. Also, it's maybe I think 3 times more expensive per kilogram to buy. So not really the cheapest cherry either, but it is very, very, very nice to work with. And we actually, I think some is going to go your way soon. We actually made a batch with a new production with Schaerbeekse cherries from the last harvest, 2019. And this one we went one step further. Now here, this was the first time we used Schaerbeekse for the 2018 in more than 20 years. I think the last time my father used those was in 1989. And then in 1990, I think he actually switched to the Polish cherries, if I'm correct. Now, this was the first time again we used Schaerbeekse cherries. Now with new harvest from 2000, we've made a second production of Schaerbeekse Kriek. And instead of bottling it, so we ferment the cherries with young lambic to get cherry lambic. We will blend this together with older lambics and young lambic to get a beer that we will bottle and bottle condition. This is what we're drinking right now. Now with the version, the edition, the vintage that we are releasing right now at the brewery, we have we have done the same steps. We fermented the cherries with young lambic, blended it with older and young lambic, but instead of just bottling it immediately, we aged it another 6 months in a foeder. And so the effect is a little bit, we will taste the difference actually between this, between doing this and not doing this with the next 2 beers. You will get some oaky character, actually even more with some vanilla touches, but the oak is very nice. And it really becomes a sort of like if you have let's compare it with wines. You have the red wine, you have the on the fruit versions, which are quite popular today. People like very fruity wines. And in the case with the oak, you really get, like just with oaky wines, this typical oak character in that beer. Very pronounced, very present, but really making the fundamentals of this beer in a taste, making it quite complex. Mm-hmm. It's a step forward also with this beer, but still very balanced and easy drinkable, you know.
Cool. Lucky we already reserved some cases of the 2019 version, so soon we can taste the difference, and we will do that. So Wolfgang is asking, that beer is quite young and the expiry date is written on the label, it's 2039, so any idea when it would be the best to drink it? So how long you would say, or you recommend that we can store the beer and then it will be, maybe we can taste the first big differences, you know, after 5, 6, 7 years? Or is it okay to drink it fresh? Or it doesn't matter if it's fresh or if it's aged?
Well, it's interesting because also, of course, this was hang on, I see I have to connect my charger.
Okay, don't worry.
I prepared this, so there we go. No, so it was the first time that we used Schaerbeekse Kriek, but we noticed it's quite similar in this perspective towards, at least in the first months, towards our Oude Kriek, the one we'll taste next. In the first weeks, you notice huge evolution in the bottle conditioning. The first month, the first 2 months, we released it after 2 months last year, the one we're tasting right now. And at that point, it still tasted quite young. It was like it's very round, easy drinking, but they're like, oh, where's the complexity but it's all growing. It opened up. Now this one is bottled in 2019, the 3rd of April 2019. So this is now in bottle for just over a year. Got to say, it's gotten right. It's gotten its character to a good point now. I suppose this will evolve a little bit more. And perhaps at 2 years with Oude Kriek, generally at 2 years you get a really nice point where you taste it. But after this, it's you still get evolution. I'm not gonna say it's gonna go down, definitely not. But the evolution, it's a curve like this. So you get sort of the first 2 years, you get a nice evolution. Well, the first month it goes like this.
Okay.
First month it goes just like. And then the first years you have a nice evolution, and then after 2 years it's sort of like the evolution goes slower. There is still nice evolution in taste in the bottle, but the evolution goes much slower over time. And so that's also when I talked about laying the bottle on the side. If you want to age for a long time, it takes a lot of time, and because it already takes so much time, even when laying it down, to get evolution, to get an effect of this evolution, you have to wait at least 6 years to really get a relevant point for putting your bottle on the side. Now also with Kriek, it is like this, but I think at 2 years we can say it's going to be at a good point. But personally, right now, tasting this right now, I've got to say I'm very pleased with the results for this specific batch.
I agree. So Roland is asking, the ABV is higher than the normal Kriek. Is that due to different sugar content of the Schabergse cherries, or is it just a decision of the brewer?
It has a decision of the brewer. One thing, you could not make it at 4%. It's also a technical thing.
Okay.
You have to think also the bottle conditioning adds about 0.5% of alcohol to the beer. But it has to do with the sugar content, definitely, of the cherries, and the fact that there's older lambic also in this beer. Older lambic, which has taken more time to ferment over time, so the alcohol percentage in that is also a bit higher. So the density of this beer is also a bit higher.
But then Schaberg's 2019 have the same alcohol content, or is it different?
It's the same.
It's the same. Okay.
Yeah, we made sure we want to make it the same.
Okay.
Even though it is aged in the foeders, because you would think maybe with the foeders it's a bit higher, but we actually wanted to get it to the same for some comparative reasons. We wanted to see where it goes, and so yeah.
Cool. One thing I personally want to know: food. Which kind of food you recommend to the first 3 fruit beers? Is there something particular you say, or?
Good question. With Kriek, something for food. It's for me personally less something I drink with food. The Kriek and the more perhaps and this is something also I notice in restaurants, that they would maybe combine it with desserts, more like sweeter desserts. Also chocolate, of course. Chocolate and cherries always goes nice together. Perhaps a typical one, but often with desserts it is combined. But for me, it's less of an association for me to combine these two specifically. Maybe the other ones we can go with food, but the Kriek and the Framboise, for me, it's just like a regular beer.
Drink it.
Yes.
Yeah.
An aperitif, it is fantastic too. I mean, definitely, it's an aperitif. It is fantastic. But, for me, it's less to combine with the food. No.
Okay.
If you find something, let me know. I want to know. Definitely, I suppose there's something you can.
Because it's really sweet, and chocolate, you're completely right, you know, chocolate and berries goes always well, you know.
Yeah. Right.
Really nice one.
How are you liking the Scabics and Markus?
This one, I really enjoyed. And it was good that you give me something like a hint, because I forgot, you know, to reserve some cases, and it was a good hint from you. So I'm really looking forward to taste the new version, you know, this 2019. But that's a really good one.
Yeah.
That's really, really good. And I will keep some bottles, you know, and we'll taste it in 2 years to see, you know, how really it goes, you know, how the evolution goes. No, but I really like it. Overall, you know, when you can find now in these days that people paying an unbelievable amount of money for aged Kriek or aged, I don't know, whatever they can find, you know, especially in the States. What do you think about that kind of thing? Is it worthwhile for that kind of beer, or is it more like the geeks, they are willing to pay whatever they can get, they pay what people are charging, make it sense? Or is it still something you say, get this bottle, drink it fresh, then it's okay?
If you look at the beers that have that really get these high prices, today there's without mentioning brands and breweries, but there are sources where the price is already perhaps quite high, and from our philosophy of beer, too high, because you're selling. Let's be realistic. You're selling beer. You want to bring beer to the people, and if you want to do it in the local, according to the local tradition here, it is a beer for people in the region, and you don't want to sell it more expensive than the regular or what the beer should be priced as. Now, for all the, like as you say, in the United States or in the secondary markets, you see bottles being sold at ridiculous prices. To be honest, what you see, you often see bottles that they're not all. Sometimes there's good ones. Sometimes there are good ones, and you know they're for good reason. They're people seek them, and I hope that if they pay this much money, they will actually drink the bottle. That they're not just. I mean, maybe it's also as a piece of art and an investment. That's perhaps a nice comment on Lambic beer. But more often, you would see that these higher prices are paid for bottles that are of a brand that is more trendy, more hyped in the Lambic world than others. Perhaps these higher prices are paid because someone's heard this brand name, and then they say, okay, yeah, that is from those guys, so it must be worth a lot. So, but if you taste the beers, I mean, there's good beers, as I said, but quite often the ones that I hear prices, and then I think but when you really imagine buying a case of this. I mean, for me, the test is, if I drink a beer, will I buy 12 or 24 bottles of this? Will I do this? Yes or no? And then the decision, I mean, I need to get to a decision really quick. If it's no, then I'm like, oh, why are
Okay, yeah, then it's a no, yeah.
It's and then if for you see bottles that are so expensive. So the secondary markets, sometimes some brewers they don't want to feed it, and they say they don't want to feed it. I think by saying it, they actually do feed into it.
And I completely agree on that kind of sentence, you know, because minimum, and then of course there will come some. Yeah.
It's exactly, and it's a sort of reverse marketing. And they say then it's the brewers that say we do nothing of marketing. Whatever marketing is, everything you do and say. What I'm doing right now is definitely also marketing.
Marketing,
I mean,
it's marketing.
You come outside your brewery and you hold your bottle in front of someone. This is marketing. Everything you do to show what you do to someone else is marketing. Whatever you say or on social media or to a journalist, whatever. So, but it's I would say some beers are definitely correctly priced higher. Personally, I'm not the guy who would pay this much money, but if you have the money, I can understand if you do pay it. But for a lot of other bottles of beer, I think the price is too high, and it's just an overinflation of the price because of trends and hypes around a certain brand name or something like this.
But we also can find this not even with lambics. So there are also other beer styles, other breweries in Belgium, you know, where there's a big hype, and in the end, okay, yeah, it's a beer, which is nice, okay, yeah, you can pay a certain amount of money, but no time and never ever more. But yeah, that is how it is. Cool, Karel. Let's go to the next beer.
Yes. So the next beer is Oude Kriek Boon. You'll see it's quite similar label to the one we just had. It's very similar in style. So it's because this beer is made This beer is made almost, let's just say, in the same way as a Schaerbeekse Kriek. The only difference is that we use a different type. It is the Polish cherry that we use, the Polish one that we use for the other Kriek we tasted in the start. But we use 400 grams of cherries per liter. Now, very important, this is not like saying I have the biggest car, I mean, in the amount of cherries that you use. It's not something to brag about necessarily. This is purely a decision based on the balance of the taste of the beer and the intensity of the cherries. The intensity here with the 400 grams is about the same intensity you get from the Schaerbeekse we just tasted, but those were only 250 grams per liter. But it's because the cherry themselves are so powerful in taste. The Polish ones that we use are not as powerful. They are nice in flavor, but the powerfulness of them in the beer is less, so you need more to get more intensity of the flavor.
Cool. Next glass. So there's a question coming out from Wolfgang. You are pouring it, getting a nice foam head. I'm pouring it to try to get as less as foam as possible. So what is the right way to pour it?
The right way. What you have to do, start with the glass. The glass needs to be, now every beer I have poured now is always in a new glass, right? The glass needs to be clean, no fat stains on the inside of the glass. I clean my glasses by hand. I never put them in the dishwasher because in a dishwasher you always get residue from cleaning soda, whatever you call it.
Soap, some kind of fat, can be, everything can be inside,
Yeah, and this sticks onto the glass, and this is what we call a foam negative. It's a foam negative.
Same with hobby beers or lager beers. It's always the same with beer.
Exactly, and so you don't put your glass in the dishwasher. That's one. I clean them by hand, and preferably I clean them with only water. Sometimes I do use some soap, but then I clean with I rinse with water a lot after that. When I pour them, you perhaps just saw it. I keep my bottle at the distance from the glass, so of course the beer splashes into the beer that's already in the glass. So this helps to build up foam, and then you get you hold the glass in an angle for the first pour, for the first bit, so that you don't just chug it in, because if you do that, you only have foam. You start gently to get some beer, and then you tilt your glass back a little bit. You raise your bottle, and like this, by doing this movement, you create some foam, and then you just adjust. You look at what you're doing, and you just see, okay, creating foam, and then more gentle. You go closer to the glass. Maybe you do sideways a little bit here again, and that is how you balance it.
But it's up to the consumer, or I'm wrong? Is it up to the consumer if he wants to create a foam during pouring the beer, or is it needed for the product?
It's needed. You need to have foam on the beer.
On this, on a Kriek, I need foam.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Then I was wrong because really.
You see here, I poured this a couple of, I think it's maybe a minute or two now already. See, you're doing quite well. You can even raise the bottle a little bit, create more foam, and then there you go.
Yeah.
See?
Because I was thinking that it's not needed to create a foam when it comes to a Kriek, for example, because I know how to pour a beer overall, but that was a good question then from Wolfgang, because I always try to get a Lambic or a Kriek without any foam.
Okay. Let me just get you one thing. Hang on.
So, Wolfgang, ganz kurz. Also ich war falsch und der Karel war richtig. Damit ist die Frage beantwortet.
This is an animal sign we put on bars.
Okay.
Foam, beer.
Okay. Yeah. So I also learned something. No, it's okay, Every day you learn something, and today I learned.
I will tell you, this is a very good question. This is a very good question, really, because if it's a topic we talk about at the brewery. There's maybe three things, but there's definitely two things. One, in Belgium, if you get beer and it is flat, and if a consumer gets it in a bar, receives it as it's flat, or even at home, you pour it and like, what the hell? There's no foam on this. You think there's something wrong with the beer. Now you send it back to the bar. If you have foam on it, technical aspect is also the foam will protect your beer from oxygen, which is nice if you keep it. You're drinking it slowly. I mean, you see, there's a small ring on here. The ring stays on there. I can't really show it here. I mean, perhaps I can show it.
Oh, I love that ring. Yeah.
Layer of foam, and so protect it from oxygen, and this means that you can enjoy it slowly and keep drinking it without the beer getting too much affected by oxygen from the environment. Then again, your remark is quite interesting, because we do, and this is a topic we talk about at the brewery. When we go to outside Belgium, we notice it's not always so typical to have foam on the beer. A very typical example would be maybe the English style of pouring a beer.
Flat, over and over, completely full without any foam. Yeah.
But I know stories about the first perhaps not, but the first Belgian beers being sold at larger scale, let's say in the UK, and then just everything returning back to the brewery because they say there's something wrong with your beer. It's only foam, even with the sediment. They say like there's particles floating in your bottle. There's something wrong. No, it's just the sediment. I mean, these are known. I'm talking about 40 years ago, maybe now. These kind of stories I know from my father and from other brewers. But also, and this is interesting with today's technology, we look at Untapped, for example, and you see all the pictures of people pouring the beer, and you see where they're from, and this is mostly like the United States too. If you have sour beers, often you see without foam. It has to do with aspects of the beer, technical aspects of the beer, that it actually prohibits foam from being created. But good.
And all that kind of things, when it comes to beer overall. But I thought, it doesn't matter if you create a foam with Kriek or Lambic beers, but that's something.
Yeah, and it's also the a lot of work to get foam on the beer. The question about malt earlier, already it starts with the right malt and the right way of malting just to get your foam right. I mean, and of course other things in the beer as well, but it starts there already. And these are topics we talk about. I mean, when we judge beer, I can tell my brother, my brother, by the way, I did not explain this. We're a family brewery. So it's myself and my brother running the brewery today. My father is also still involved, but less. My brother, he's responsible for the production. But if we taste beer, so I can say to him, look, Jos, there's an issue with this beer. There's not enough foam. Like, okay. But this would be one thing I would definitely remark if that would be the case. And yeah, I definitely agree with everyone saying it's an incredible beer. I'm also very much enjoying it. Thank you for the comments, by the way.
Yeah.
The Oude Kriek is typically, you're going to notice it with comparing it with the Kriek Mariage parfait. The Oude Kriek is what we would say on the fruit. We want the fruity side to come out. The lambic side as well, so you get some typical lambic character in it, but also the fruity side. If we go to the Mariage parfait, which is similar to the Oude Kriek, but then instead of bottling it immediately, we also age it another 6 months extra before bottling it. You'll notice that the Kriek Mariage parfait will have this oak character too.
Okay.
Added on top of this. But the Kriek is it's a very nice, enjoyable Kriek expression. It's fruity.
It's really fruity. It's really, really fruity.
Yeah. I think I saw a question earlier by Reddit about color and about the color of the beer. Probably on the earlier.
There was a question.
Yeah.
Because the label is written, there is no coloring allowed or something like this.
Yeah. But in beer, in our beers, the color is always coming from the fruit. Also, the color of the foam will change. Kriek cherries will give a very pink color to foam. You know also that adding color agents to beer is illegal. It's illegal to add coloring agents to beer. Now there is some ways to get color in beer, like you can make beer red in color by adding I don't know what the English word for this ingredient, but there's a type of thing you can add. It's just an ingredient that you can add in beer, as it's a type of carrot, I think. You could add, and it gives a red color in beer.
But you also can add color, you know. For example, the Irish are doing it, you know, when they want the green lager for their Paddy's Day, they're adding a green color liquid, which is only green color inside, you know, and then you can drink it.
But are they adding, is the brewery adding it, or is the bar adding it?
No, it's completely different. You know, there are some breweries in Austria, because there's a big Irish community in Austria. And so they are doing green lager beers, and they are adding it in the brewery.
Okay.
And then you get kegged green beer for Paddy's Day. And that's something, you also can do for other beers,
But it's possible. I don't know, maybe there's something else that you can use as green, but at least in Belgium, coloring agents are illegal in beer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now it's legal, but because it doesn't taste anything, it's not affecting the taste or the aroma, it's only the color. Which is and it's only once a day,
Yeah,
but all these colors, that's the answer on the question before, you know, all the colors are getting out from the fruits you're using. And it's getting darker if you're using more cherries per liter, then it's getting darker, of course, because there's more fruit inside.
Yeah.
And for example, the Kriek, it's really light because there are less Krieks inside. And then also less cherries, and then it's getting lighter, which is completely normal.
Yeah, absolutely, it's true. And then the thing you also notice is the color getting darker if there are indeed more cherries in the beer. That's true. But you also have to something relevant if we make tastings at the brewery very often, or relatively often, maybe once a year, of different types of Kriek beers and fruit beers. We will actually put in this tasting. We do this maybe with too many beers at the same time. It's more like an orientation tasting. It's not to get into too much detail. It can be 30 beers that we will taste, but just to compare fruited beers, also the ones with concentrates and aromas, but just for us to know what's going on out there. We're not tasting all these beers all the time, all the year. So we take one day in the year at the brewery and just look what our colleague brewers are doing. But then we see, and this is an important one, sometimes it's not always that easy to do the color, to get the color right. And this has to do with also with oxygen pickup. Oxygen will oxidize, and will create a brown flavor, a brown color. So if you have Kriek aging for a very long time, you can see that the color becomes more brownish, and this is the
result of oxygen.
Yes.
Okay, then it's oxidized. Okay.
Yeah, and you have this sometimes with beers that are relatively young from other producers that use concentrates, and then maybe some so the concentrate also gives the color, of course. But if you have a simple process where you add this and then pasteurize everything, add a lot of sugar, you can have oxidation, but you don't taste it because or don't taste it as much because it's also the sugar giving a lot of body. But then you see the color all brown, and then this is also, then we're very happy to see today that the color of our beer, we get a nice red color that is, and we see not everyone achieves it just as much. Some do, but not everyone. So it's yeah, beer is also technologically not always the easiest.
So there's a good question coming from Wolfgang, a special question from Wolfgang. You use the cherries with the stone. That's right, because you already mentioned this. Are the cherries pressed before? So you're using the juice, or you're adding the whole cherry with the stone? The whole cherry.
So we receive them in bags of 30 kilograms. It's whole cherries. They are frozen when they arrive at the factory. So we are harvested, picked, washed, individually quick frozen with nitrogen so that they are immediately still. So you get actually the effect that they're when we defrost them just by warming.
Yeah, super fresh.
They're super fresh. We have cold transport from where they're harvested to the brewery. At the brewery, we have a freezer at minus 21 degrees Celsius, where we can store 40 tons of cherries.
Oh,
yeah. and so that's about, let's say, just a bit less than 2 full trucks with cherries that we can store there at minus 21 degrees Celsius. And so when we use them, we just take the bag, open the bag, put this bag in the fermentation vessel. We fill it up to a certain level, and then we add the 1-year-old lambic, and it starts to we warm up the vessel, and it starts to re-ferment.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Completely other questions. Is it common in the Geuze, Kriek, Lambic world to do collaborations?
No.
No. Okay.
No, it's not. It's okay. The collaboration thing is more of a trend from the last 10 years, maybe. What you will see in the lambic world, perhaps rather, is that you have blenders buying who don't brew, but they will buy lambic from other brewers, with which they will make their own blends. Examples are Oude or Tilquin, Hansens, De Kam. These are examples of lambic blenders in the region. They will buy lambic from us. They will buy lambic from Lindemans and from Girardin. Mostly it's from us three. We supply about 50% of all the worts used by blenders. And they don't brew themselves, but they will age it on their own casks and foeders, and then they will bottle it.
Okay. So that's something which is common and which is quite okay when blenders are doing this, and then of course then it's something you are helping the whole category to grow, because you are selling your beer, your wort to that kind of breweries or blenders, and they can blend their own lambics.
Yeah, exactly. And this is something that's been done today. The blenders is more of a very a settled thing, or more the blenders are seen at the same level as brewers, whereas in the past, say years ago, in that era, generally, and maybe even 20 years ago still, a lot of blenders were just bars and restaurants that had casks in their cellars. They bought lambic from different brewers that they sold in their bar, and then with the rest of the lambic that they had, to fill up their casks, they would put it together, and this could perhaps free ferment in the cask even and become a sort of Geuze. Or they would just bottle it in their own bottles and have their own blends, and they would be the only ones making blends. It's still what blenders do today, blending lambic from different producers, which is something interesting because they're the only ones doing this. Of course, we're making beer and Geuze with only our own lambic. We're not buying lambic from someone else. Only blenders do this. Yeah, but so originally it comes from restaurants and bars. Blending what they have left.
They had some leftovers, they had the fooders, and so then they fill up the fooders, then they're asking bigger Lambic breweries to get some more, to fill it up, and then they can blend it by themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And it's basically, mostly it was just like small casks in the cellars of these bars and restaurants, and you know, they started buying a little bit more, and because they say, oh, we can actually try to make our own, and of course it's fun. So yeah, they do that, and a few of those survived the years. Some blenders were already more prominent blenders, and some others survived the years, and today are also known as Lambic blenders. Yeah.
Cool. Good to know.
Yeah.
Last beer.
Yes.
We have to drink it now.
It's not a punishment. There are also beers that you could say are perhaps punishments to drink, but I'm happy to report these are not. Yes. So we'll do the pouring technique.
Together now. I got it now. I understand it now completely. So don't worry about my pouring technique now. So I will get a nice head. Ganz kurz, Antwort an den Ludwig. Ja, es ist eine Fototapete. Ah, perfekt.
Cheers.
Cheers, cheers.
You notice it's going in another direction. So it is made just like Oude Kriek Boon, but instead of bottling it, you will age it another 6 months in a fooder before, in an oak fooder before bottling it, and you get this oak character immediately. So the fruitiness is of course a bit less. The fooder is more prominent, becomes more full-bodied. This is, if you would say, food pairing. You can completely replace wine, in my opinion. Like the oaky red wines, completely replace this and just drink Kriek Mariage Parfait instead. It will cost you less even.
Yeah, that's true. It's way cheaper, yeah.
But it's definitely not less qualitative. So it's a very good one also to drink with to drink with game with meat. It's very wild.
Instead of red wine, yeah, oaked red wine, you can easily use it, yeah. So it's a really nice aroma. The taste is really unique, you know, especially when it comes. And that's what we all have to think about. It's still beer. That's something really, really, really.
It's still beer. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's the point, you know, which is quite interesting for. I'm pretty sure for most of the people which are listening and watching it, you know, and tasting it, you know. So it's super complex.
But exactly, it is super complex, and you will hear me talk about or compare it to wine very often. But this is also to give you the mindset of think about wine when tasting it. But at the same time, yes, you just said it. Don't forget, it's also beer. And then suddenly it's you realize how far out of, let's say, out of the square you're going with this, because it's really also a crossing point, a bit like I said with the Geuze Mariage Parfait, between wine and whiskey. In that case, here it's really just a crossing point between beer and red wine, where you if you would have to, I mean, you guys also sell wine, right? Put this between wine and beer.
Yeah, and tell no one that there's something coming different. Yeah,
it is. But this is, and I know people who don't drink beer at all, but they do drink Kriek Mariage Parfait because they also drink wine. They don't appreciate the taste of beer. For them, beer is what they associate. It's Pilsner, and these kind of things, and they're not a fan of this. Okay, yeah, it can be. But then they like Kriek Mariage Parfait, and they say, yeah, I in beer, I only drink Kriek Mariage Parfait.
It's a good idea. The next, because there's sommeliers in our company which are only responsible for the wine, but I will come back with this idea, when the next tasting, which we will have really soon, I will ask them, bring in one Kriek Mariage Parfait and wait how the people react, It's a good point. And the point is, if everyone is going back and forth, only on the aroma profile of only the last 3 beers, then you really can smell and taste the impact of the oak fooders, because you really can get out the oak, especially between Kriek Boon, the last one, and this one, only aroma-wise, because Oude Kriek Boon is really fruit intense. You can smell the cherries, you get a lot of fruit flavor, and then only the aroma. Then you already can get the oak. So it's super nice.
Exactly.
Super nice.
Yeah. And I see someone you say actually it's quite easy to drink. The complexity is an add-on, but it's super complex but also drinkable. Yeah, but that's the case. It's, I mean, a beer, a lambic beer should be complex, but it always has to be very drinkable, and this means you need good balance. If you have complexity but it's not balanced, then I don't think you can really talk about complexity. You can have no, because
it's not drinkable. It can be complex always.
You can have perhaps one flavor being really too much, and then you say, yeah, interesting taste, but what else do you have? I mean, it's interesting to taste, but okay, I bought 1 bottle, that's it. We're a brewery. We want to fine tune what we're doing, and of course, we're selling you a bottle of beer. And if ideally you like it, and you say, okay, I like another bottle, and we make a large selection, you can of course select different types of variations of the beer. But the idea is that you don't just drink it once and then say that was nice, but meh. So you need to have something that's drinkable, but at the same time complex, and that is I think the art of making these types of beers. It's the balance and the complexity at the same time, and then you get something that's so rich in flavor, but still you can drink it quite easily, and that's fantastic. I find it fantastic.
No, and that's the most important thing, because then the consumer come back and say, okay, yes, I need another bottle or a full case, and then it's done. That's business.
Yeah.
So Wolfgang, it's time for outing. So Wolfgang is a wine guy, so he is normally drinking wine, which is also fine for us, which makes sense now, and hopefully you will drink now in the future a little bit more of Kriek or the beers from Boon. Before we go back to most of the questions, there are no collaborations, but then we can find in the market, also in Austria, the people can find some Mikkeller, Boon beers. Is this then a collaboration, or is it only that you made this kind of a contract for Mikkeller?
Yeah. So so yeah, indeed, we started doing some collaborations with Mikkeller in the last years. We call them collaborations, but you have to take note that we made the whole beer.
Okay.
we made the whole beer. Why are there collaborations? It's because we would not have made that specific blend or tried something different in the blend if Mikkeller hadn't asked us or talked with us about what would be interesting to try and these kind of things. So with the guys at Mikkeller and with Mikkel himself, we talk about certain different possibilities with the beer. Perhaps we keep in touch quite regularly. We email very regularly, and then I personally often also go to their beer festivals in Denmark, so we see each other regularly. And this way, we talk about these beers and what's possible, and then we try to do something about yearly. That's about what we try to do. And there's always some possibilities, and mostly until now, it's always been Geuze's. So it's always Geuze's, and then based on different lambics that were available in the brewery. Perhaps we had just bought new foeders, like we did the vermouth foeder one, that was actually a sort of like the Vats. It was a monoblend. The Mikkeller, I'm talking about the Mikkeller one, the green label. With them, it was the foeder was the first filled for the first time with lambic, and it was used for vermouth white wine before. Quite specific taste, and they're like they loved it, and so I said, let's make a monoblend with this, and so that became a collaboration. Now we're talking about something that's a little bit. We have some foeders at the brewery right now, which are actually originally champagne foeders, and now we're going to do something with this with Mikkeller. But for the year after that, so 2021. We are talking about something else than Geuze, but rather Oude Kriek with Danish cherries. And so we got some contacts for cherries through Mikkeller. And so this is another collaboration that's in the making right now. But of course, it's now to get harvest cherries from 2020. So in this summer, and then make the beer at the end of the year, age it, and so on. So it will be ready probably in 1 year time, somewhere in April, May next year. But these are collaborations in this way, yeah.
Okay, good to know. Konrad is saying oak is not the main influence. I get more bread which sits in the oak barrels than taste and aroma of the oak. It's okay. Yes, I agree. There are these bacteria sitting, so it can be also some kind of bread character. But in the aroma, sorry, Konrad, I get really this oak kind of flavor.
Yeah, but it's correct, because if you would use completely new foeders for this,
different taste, different aroma. I completely agree. So
we have 4 dedicated. Well, 2 are dedicated for switch between Lambic and Kriek Mariage Parfait. But we have 2 dedicated foeders at the brewery. We always use for Kriek Mariage Parfait. But we've been using them for years now, and we always use them. It's 6 months in the foeder, so it's twice a year that they're once a year, every half year they're filled again. And so that's, of course, you get less new oak character, because of course it's not new oak, but you get the microflora inside also does its job, and indeed you taste this too. But you get still some oak aroma in this way. It's a different nuance, but it's it's very well noted. Yeah.
So is it possible to buy an old foeder then from the brewery? No. Mm-hmm. Are you selling it? No.
No, because generally we don't have foeders for scrap.
Okay.
We recently did decommission a foeder, and it was foeder number 108, which we used for VAT 108 in the past. And before emptying it, we used it to make a new monoblend VAT 108. We call it VAT 108 bis. We've not released it yet, but we took it apart. This foeder is decommissioned, but we took it apart, and so the staves are now in our our library of foeder parts, because we have our own fridge at the brewery. We can take apart the whole foeder, put it back together, repair it. Even the very big ones of 27,000 liters. I mean, if you stand in front of those foeders, volume-wise, it's a diameter and it's the height is 3.5 to 4 meters high. They're horizontal foeders, but you have to imagine the volume. So these we can perfectly repair at the brewery. We know how to do this. We don't make new foeders at the brewery. That's not what we do. That's a bit step too far. But for this, we do have to keep staves from other foeders as spare parts for other ones and so on. So in this way, sometimes if a foeder has too many technical problems with parts of the wood, perhaps certain parts are too thin over time, then we will take it apart and keep it as spare parts. But generally, we keep using it as long as possible. And then we have sold some foeders to friends in the neighborhood who bought them and then put them in their garden and transformed them into something for their children to play in and so on.
Okay.
But it's not something. It's really foeders at the end of their lives. Or if we buy, let's say we find 20 foeders somewhere secondhand. We've been buying a lot of foeders the last years. Now we're gonna calm down because we have what we need. But we bought, like, if you buy 20 foeders, sometimes there's 1 or 2 in there that are just completely, don't bother to fix them. I mean, even for spare parts, don't bother. And then of course, then we haven't used them, but then we sell them to friends who want to use them.
They
Or
they can reuse it and build something out for the children.
Exactly.
Cool. So I would say, let's see which questions we have coming out. Is there any particular question coming for you? Gabriela is asking, so she noticed that there's a completely different crowd listening and watching, and I would say yes, there's a completely big difference, Gabriela, between, let's say, the normal beer drinkers or beer geeks and between this tasting now, because I get quite also this feeling that a lot of really wine people are watching and listening and participating this tasting now. So I completely agree. It's a different kind of crowd, and that's the interesting thing. And as I mentioned before, the good thing is it's still beer. That's the really, really nice part.
Yeah.
Okay. No more question coming. I would say thank you, Karel. I hope you have fun as we had, because it was, for me, it was super, super interesting. It was a great experience. And to be honest, it was the first ever Boon tasting I did with 6 different beers in a row. So it was also something completely new for me, and that's also something which is, of course, good for my experience, but also good for the experience of all our clients, which participate. And thank you again. And maybe you have some words to maybe the wine people, to the journalists, to the other people which are listening and watching.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I hope everyone had a great evening. I definitely had as well. A lot of fun. Beers. I mean, it's we're still Thursday, so there's still Friday to go. So it's a good Thursday. No, it's a fantastic and good questions. Really, very interesting questions. Good things to talk about. I hope everyone was able to learn some stuff and taste good beer, and I think that's the most important. In the end of the road, the beer is good, and we have a good time.
Perfekt. So, danke Karel, noch einmal. So, jetzt von meiner Seite auch danke vielmals fürs Zuschauen. Ich hoffe, es hat wieder Spaß gemacht und es war eine andere Art der Verkostung. Wir hatten komplett andere Biere, aber wirklich, wirklich tolle Biere. Jetzt noch ganz kurz hingewiesen auf die nächsten Termine. Nächster Termin ist Dienstag, 12. Mai. Wir haben Next Level zu Gast, eine Wiener Wanderbrauerei. Dann kommt etwas, das heute Nachmittag on air gegangen ist oder live gegangen ist. Wir haben am 19. Mai etwas wirklich Spezielles an Land gezogen für alle österreichischen Bierliebhaber. Wir haben die Ehre, gemeinsam mit Martin Dickey vom Brewdog, also einen der Besitzer vom Brewdog, Biere zu verkosten. das sei ganz kurz erwähnt, es ist eine limitierte Geschichte, weil es sehr viele Biere sind. Ich muss sogar dem Martin 2 Biere schicken, weil er sie selbst nicht mehr hat. Also wir haben da wirklich schon etwas ausgegraben aus dem Keller. Also das Ganze ist limitiert auf 100 Personen. Und am 21. am Feiertag, am 21. Mai, haben wir die Jungs von Lontium zu Gast. Der Alois wird mit uns seine Biere verkosten. Also es geht weiter und es macht Spaß. Und in diesem Sinne wünsche ich euch noch einen schönen Abend mit den 6 Bieren vom Boon. Jetzt könnt ihr sie austrinken und sie nochmals genießen. Schönen Abend, gute Nacht.